Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, and wishing you a beautiful day. Today, we have a great honor to have our guest speaker, Dan. Welcome, Dan, joining our call today. And it's our privilege to have you for our Insight Sharing show. Would you please share with us a little bit about yourself and your passion, your work, and all the journey that you have been doing with all the great work?
Well, first of all, let me say, Vivian and Hyde, it's a pleasure to join you guys. I've been following and watching the work that you're doing, the guests that you're bringing on, the thoughtful and provocative questions, and the sort of the purpose behind these exchanges. And I think it's really, really cool. So it's a real pleasure for me to be with you guys. And little background on myself. My name is Dan Norenberg. As you can hear, I've got a North American accent. So perhaps as Bruce Springsteen said, I was born in the USA, but I was made in Germany. So I've spent half my life in the US and half my life in Europe, primarily living in Munich. I'm a coach, advisor, and consultant to executive and strategic leadership teams. That's my passion. And it's been a long journey to arrive at that point. And I'm sure that over the course of our conversation, we'll touch on some of those points.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Dan. Allow us to bring you back in different point in time in your life. Okay, so we're gonna bring you back to where you first started. When in America. So when we were young, we always have dream of one day when we grow up, we're gonna become somebody doing some kind of job, right? And now you're doing a lot of amazing things. But back then, what did you think one day you're gonna become in, Dan?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and let me answer it with some impulses, some things that I remember when I was very young, because I think that then tells a little bit of maybe the story that I found myself on. So I grew up in a place called Iowa. It's really in the middle of the U.S. It's corn country. It's home of John Deere tractor. It's family and church and sports and school and family. I mean, it's a really I felt it was like a Disneyland type of growing up. I grew up in a very small town just outside of Des Moines, Iowa. My mother was a school teacher. She taught elementary school, so she was really into helping, small children, small human beings learn, find their place. She loved her job, and my father was the football coach and the phys ed coach who later became the principal of my high school. So having your father as the principal of the high school is a little bit sketchy, but that's maybe for another episode. So I grew up in this kind of environment, and I was always surrounded by, let me say, leadership figures who were really interested in seeing me succeed. So whether it was somebody in the church or somebody in the school, a teacher, maybe a coach. I was always surrounded by really good teachers, really good role models for leaders, and they really took an interest in my development. And that was very, very helpful for me. So now looking to where I'm at now, working with executive and strategic leadership teams, there's probably something about being imprinted with very positive leadership models. And sometimes on my workshops, I'll say, think about someone who was really an extraordinary leader in your life. And sometimes people don't raise their hand, and they say, Dan, if I'm honest, I've never really worked for a leader that inspired me or challenged me. And I find that's very sad because, we all should be leading at our very best, and we deserve to be led by the very best. And perhaps that's one of the reasons why I got in the business. So one of the stories was just being surrounded by people that were always either helping me learn something or challenging me to do a little bit better on the football field or something like that. And that was, a very positive impression. The second thing about Iowa, which a lot of people don't know, they have a tremendous education system. So really first-class education system, great teachers, great curriculum. And so that really got me into learning and education in school. So that was also an imprint. And now to come to your question, Ha, which is really a really good question. When you asked that question, the picture that I got in my mind was I got a picture of sitting in the 5th class. And it was the 5th grade, and I was obviously quite small then. And in my town there's a we had schools in different locations, and this particular school was about 5 miles outside of town, just surrounded by cornfields. But when you looked out the window, in those days they had these the school was built in like 1900 or 1905, so they were like huge windows. You could probably almost drive a car through them. You know, now it would be illegal to have a window that large in a cool school with small children. But I remember looking out that window, and out the window I could see corn for as far as you could see, but along there was also Interstate 80. And I know you guys have spent some time in the US, so Interstate 80 is kind of that freeway, that interstate that goes right across America, you know. And I remember just looking out and seeing that freeway and wondering as a fifth grader, thinking, what's out there beyond the corn? You know, what's out there? And you know, I have a lot of friends that I went to school with all the way from kindergarten through 12th grade, and they've stayed around Iowa in their hometown, and it's a wonderful place. It's an absolutely wonderful place. I love going back there, and they're very happy. For me, I was always sort of thinking, what's out beyond the cornfield? And so that's kind of what took me on the journey, which eventually ended up in Europe.
So what's out there out of the cornfield actually is Germany, is Munich. So that's answer the questions, right?
But that took many turns before I actually made it to Europe. That was also an interesting story that we may approach.
So when you ask the question, what out there, you know, beside, you know, out there outside of the cornfield, what the answer did you find yourself back then at the 5th grade?
Well, I just found myself always curious about meeting different types of people. I mean, Iowa was a great place to grow up. It's fairly homogeneous in terms of the types of people. It's mainly, you know, Northern Europeans that settled there primarily. When I was growing up a long time ago, it's changing now. And after the high school and college, I wanted to go into law school. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to become a lawyer and get involved in criminal justice. That was my big passion. But I thought, you know, before I go to law school, it probably would be a good idea to have 1 year of business experience, just so I understand a little bit about business. I didn't want to practice business law. I wanted to practice criminal law, but I thought that would be a good idea. And so I ended up going to California, ending up in this place called Silicon Valley. I wasn't an engineer, but I got involved with my background. I got involved in sales and marketing roles with different high-tech companies. And so to answer your question, this move from Iowa first took me to California, and California is really quite a rainbow of different people from all over the U.S. and all over the world, actually. And I found myself very at home with being with different types of people who think differently than me, who look differently than me. And I found that very, very interesting, very, very stimulating. So I think that was part of my journey, was just meeting people who were different than me, learning from their stories, and profiting from their experiences.
Wow. I have a question. Back then when you in Iowa, right? And you've been surrounded with a lot of people who would like, you know, to support, to make sure that you're successful, right? And that's amazing. But, you know, when you get into school, university, there's so many options out there for you to choose to be successful. You know, you can go into the business world, you can be engineer, and then you can be, you know, like you know, computer science, things like that. But you chose to study psychology and criminology, and why is that? What's interested you back then?
Well, I was, you know, as I said, I was interested in people, and of course, one of the core drivers of people is the human mind, and I felt that psychology would maybe help me understand myself better, maybe understand others better, and so that was the primary drive with the psychology, and I had some really good professors in the university. And then the criminology followed. That was my minor. Psychology was the major, criminology was the minor. And I also had the opportunity to work with a couple of my professors. I actually spent time in prison. So don't panic. No, I don't want anybody to panic. I got to go home at night, but we did some projects where we took young people into maximum security prisons and let them meet with prisoners to see what life was like there, in an effort to sort of maybe scare them straight, and so they will stop this kind of life of crime. And that had a very profound experience for me. So I had this idea of become a lawyer in my mind, but to be quite honest, it wasn't like I was quite open to a lot of different things. So I would say that really early in my career, I was a little bit frustrated because I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. And I had many different interests from, business to psychology to going back and getting a PhD. And I would see people find a path and be on it and be very happy. But for me, I always felt it was a challenge, maybe a little bit of a curse, having so many interests. But now at my age, in my senior years, I can draw on all those experiences, all those journeys to support senior leaders, and they're very tough. So I feel it's really been a helpful background. But if you tried to trace it on a piece of paper and the journey, you'd say, where is this guy going? Because he's going here and then he's going there. And then but in the end, it's worked out very well. I'm very, very grateful for the life that my wife and I have been able to create and the friends and clients around us.
Wow.
So Dan, with so many choices and options, and finally you get your calling, how is that aha moment come to you? When would be the time? Is that in Europe, in US? What happened that you found that this is my calling?
Well, great question, Vivian. I mean, I think I've had several aha moments, but I have a little bit of an advantage because I've learned how to I've learned about the power and the secret of regret. And that may sound a little bit strange, but I had a really intense experience with regret. And maybe real briefly, when I was it might not be somebody else's regret, but for me, it was highly personal, highly profound, and it changed the course of my life. And I wouldn't be sitting here today without that situation. I was in the university and I went to a place called the University of Northern Iowa. Most people don't know it, but it's a very good state school for education. And they were building the first indoor football stadium in Iowa, which if you've ever been to Iowa in the wintertime and played football, it gets really, really cold. And my father played at this university. So I had this idea that I was going to go to UNI and play football there in this dome stadium and become, who knows what would come after that. Well, and I was a pretty good football player. I was a quarterback in high school, and I went to college and realized that, there's a lot of people from a lot of places, and they're a lot better than me at the position of quarterback. So I had to move and play defense. So that was my first shift. The second thing, after being one of the top players and being recognized in high school, I realized that I wasn't one of the top players in college. In fact, I was playing behind other people, and I'd never played behind other people. This was really hard for me to process. My ego was a little bit too strong, I would say, at that point. Finally, after a couple of years, I said to myself, I just drew a line in the sand. And I said, if I'm not playing on the first team in the next game, which is going to be televised on national television, I'm going to quit the team. This was my third year at the university. And long story short, I didn't play in that televised game. I went into the coaches the following Monday. I said, guys, I'm going to quit. I've had enough football. I'm done. They said, don't quit. You've got potential. You've got an opportunity. But the fact is, I quit. And a week later, the guy that was playing in front of me injured his knee. And the position would have been mine. But it wasn't mine because I'd quit the team. Now, for years, I mean, literally for years, I used to wake up in the middle of the night dreaming that I had saved the game, had made the big play. But it was far in the past, and I couldn't save the game because I had quit the team. So I always had this. I really regretted this, quitting the football team. But that feeling, I really kept that for about 10 years, and then, now to come to the really large aha moment. So I leave California. The company I'm with goes out of business. I take a backpack. I head to Europe. I think I'm coming for 9 days, right? I do my tour through Europe. My eyes are already as big as baseballs. I'm so excited about being in Europe. I find it's very, very interesting. I changed my ticket 21 more days and did a tour through Munich and Stuttgart and Geneva and Paris. I went back to Paris for my last week. And the night before I was supposed to fly back to Los Angeles, the night before, because I just went to Europe just to think for a little bit, I had this very vivid dream. And I dreamt that I was 80 years old. I saw myself, back in California, pushing the lawnmower, 2 kids, 2 cars, which is a really nice thought. However, I thought to myself, Dan, when you're 80 years old, will you look back at that moment when you were in Europe? You had no job, you had no house. I'd sold my house. I had no relationship. My girlfriend and I had broken up. I had no obligations. I said, when you're 80 years old, will you wish that you had stayed in Europe a little bit just to explore, maybe learn a language, whatever? And it was that the shadow of regret. Again, from the football, I'd had it for 10 years. And I thought, not this time. Not this time. I will not live a life of regret. The next morning, I got up, and instead of going to the airport, I took a train back to Munich. I didn't know one person. I didn't speak a word of German, and I didn't have any work papers because I was American. I wasn't a member of the European community or a German resident. So I'm living in Germany. I just come back here, and I'm just like moving around for some weeks, just trying to find a place and figure out what to do. It wasn't like I was going to be a consultant, but that was my aha moment, was this feeling that, Dan, when you're 80, you might look back and think, I mean, I love the US, and I'm sure I would have had a good life there, but that possibility of regret was so disturbing for me that I thought, no, I've got to go back and explore Germany. I thought it would be for maybe, I don't know, a few months, and 30 years later, I'm still here. But over the course of time, I met, the most beautiful woman in my life who shaped my life, and that's my wife, Uta, and she's helped build a family with me, and we have 2 children, and then came a business behind that. But so that was my aha moment. And throughout my life, when I feel that there might be a possibility of regret, I choose the other path, and it's always been good for me. So that's been my kind of, if you will, my secret weapon. I ran a consulting company in Europe for 25 years. I started that. That's a long story, but I started that, ran that for 25 years with 15 consultants. We worked with Disney and Lego and Allianz and the European Patent Office, some really top brands. But during that time, I started getting involved with senior leadership teams. And I was running the business of 15 consultants and doing this stuff with senior leadership teams. At some point, I realized I can't really do both of those in a great way. And so I made it, because I thought, but if I don't pursue the senior leadership team work, and I wrote a book about it, and I talk about that as well. But I thought, if I don't pursue the work at the senior leadership level in their teams, which for me is the most influential group of any organization, the very top team, I will have a regret. There it was again, the regret. So I actually let my company go over the course of several years, which I loved the company. I ran it, I owned it for 25 years, but let that go because I had to put all my energy into supporting senior leaders and the teams that they lead in organizations across Europe, Asia, and North America. So long answer to your question, but for me, aha had to do with when I look forward, if I'm standing in a challenging situation or something like that, I'm thinking, like, when I think out 10, 15, 20 years, what could I look back and regret, and how can I make sure I don't have that regret? So that's served me really well.
Wow.
Much then, yeah. Give me a takeaway that when opportunity come, try to embrace it.
Yes.
And really not getting regret. Yeah.
Yes. And the Germans have a very nice saying, let's say, roughly translated, Germans say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So if I come to Munich, and the first years were very, very hard. I had to go back and start with nothing, after being a, senior marketing director, really, really from the very ground floor. And there were some hard times. It took about 4 or 5 years until I found my niche, found my place. And so we just have to be prepared to pay a price for what we believe in and what we think we want to aspire to.
Wow. I think let go of the business that you built for 25 years to start something that you see, the more important in your life, and that you don't want to regret, not doing it is not an easy decision to make to the many people. So it's very, very bravery of you to let go of something already been successful and to start something that can make you even more successful. So then how is that, what is the journey that led you to write the book, the book, Executive Ownership, though? How does it happen?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a little bit of an unusual title. I mean, executive ownership. People ask me, what is the title there? But for me, my work is about starting at the top of the organization, working with leaders at the top of the organization in a team construct, and through this transformational process that I call executive ownership, which is really about executive meaning at the highest level, which in the organization, and executive also means at the very personal level, number one. And then I use the word shift because shift is like a small change. And to own is the deepest level of engagement. So it's about at the highest level, at the most personal level, how do we take ownership, deepest level of engagement for those small changes that lead to big differences in our life, in our corporate culture, in our organizational results. That's why I called it that. And I really wanted to have that title, and I hope to bring that into mainstream. So very simply, it's this top-down process, team process of engaging senior leaders, because change really starts at the top of the organization, not the bottom or the middle of the organization. That's why I chose that focus. And this backstory about how I came into that work, which led to the book, was that as I was running the other consulting company called Envision Learning for 25 years, and we were doing primarily talent management, working in sort of the middle of the organization, first-time leaders up to strategic leaders. And from time to time, either someone from the executive suite or the senior vice president from HR would come and say, Dan, we've seen the work that you're doing, in our talent programs. Would you, speak or observe our senior leadership team? They've been struggling. They need some help. They need some competent advisory work or coaching or consulting. Would you talk to them? And I said, well, I'd be happy to. And then they sort of put their hand on my elbow and say, well, don't get your hopes up too much. They've already worked with 3 consultants so far this year. And I said, that doesn't matter. I'd be happy to talk to them. And maybe, it's also your experience and yours as well, Vivian, but what I saw when I, let's say, was invited into the C-suite, that these men and women at the very top of the organization, they're very intelligent, they're very motivated, they have a great deal of, let me say, intellectual firepower. They know their businesses very well. But as an organizational unit, as a leadership team, they don't really work well together. It's like a group of individuals. They've all got a lot of power. They've all got a lot of ego. And this was really striking for me. And what was striking was, none of us are perfect, but what was striking was not only was there let's say, a degree of dysfunction, or let me say the other way, opportunities to improve, they didn't really realize how problems or challenges or the messy business in the leadership team was impacting other parts of the business. And so I started working with them with, my observations, my tools, my processes. I'm not coming into leadership teams and telling them how they should be. As of today, I've worked with over 150 executive and strategic leadership teams on 3 continents. So I have a great deal of experience. However, if I add up all the experience in a leadership team, my 20 years is nothing compared to the 150 years. So I see myself a little bit like a coach on the sideline playing with Premier League players, helping them recognize the small things that aren't working, either in their leadership or the way they collaborate, and help them make that shift, take ownership for that shift, because when that shifts a little bit, it creates tremendous opportunities, for the business and for the customers. And so that was the journey that started about 15 years ago when I was still running the consultancy. And I continued to do that. And then finally the book idea came because I thought, all these teams, all these experiences, I need to put them in some kind of organized way so I can go back and reference the stories, the tools, things like that. And so that was the original idea. It was just to be kind of a field book for me. And then I thought, hey, some of the clients that I've worked with, they might like to have a copy of this field book. And then it became a book, became executive leadership, creating highly effective leadership teams. Because what I also realize is there are a lot of consultants and coaches and HR people who are trying to find the right way to engage with the senior leadership team. And that's not easy. You know, there's a lot of power there. They have a lot of stuff on their agenda. They don't want to hear words like training. You know, they're the very senior people. That's a word. It's really about, you know, how can I help them enable their business to be more successful? That's kind of my portal in there. And so I've tried to write the book also in a way that it has a lot of stories in there. It has a lot of tools that you can put to practice. I really believe you can't read this book and not get at least one or two ideas to improve yourself or improve your leadership team. And if you're not a senior leader, it's still, I think, a very good resource for personal development.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. Since you have a chance to work with a lot of executives, you know, in 3 continents, like you said, right? And you know, we all have the blind spot. We all have, you know, the areas that we need to make improvements on. So if it's boiled down to one thing that's the hardest for leaders to, you know, to shift and to, you know, to take to be the owner of that shift, what is the commonly that you see is the hardest thing as leaders to change?
Great question. And with your permission, I'm going to mention 3 things because I don't think I can crystallize it just to one. I think it's number one that in these very senior leadership teams, they are responsible for clarifying and describing what the future success of the business looks like. Not the next quarter, not the next 6 months, not even the next year, but where's the business going over the next 2, 3, 4, or 5 years? And that's becoming more and more difficult. There's so much volatility, change, dynamic. We're so connected. It's very difficult to do that. And a lot of leadership teams, they just lose the patience. They drop down into more operational aspects and focus on the next quarter of business. So I think one of the things that prevents leadership teams from playing at their best is just not having a clear, not staying with it and being disciplined to create a clear picture of future success. That's number one. And number 2 is that, and I sometimes use the metaphor of the oxygen mask. You know, most leadership teams don't practice the oxygen mask rule, which we hear on every airline, going to every destination, on every flight. When something happens, take the oxygen mask first for yourself, and then, you know, help others. And at the senior leadership level, they have so many issues coming at them. All the time, issues are coming, so they get into this organizational firefighting. They jump in to fix a process. They jump in to fix a strategy, and they don't really pay attention to what is the health, what is the quality of our leadership team performance? How do we talk to each other? How do we collaborate with each other? How do we make decisions? Even things as basic as how do we run an exceptional, you know, executive management meeting, you know? And sometimes I'll ask leadership teams, I'll say, is this leadership meeting the best meeting of the company? And they'll say, oh, no, we can barely get this. And I say, if you're the senior leaders and you can't put together an exceptional meeting that's highly collaborative and results oriented, how can anybody else in the business do that? So the second point, then, we have this lack of a clear picture about what future success looks like. We have the oxygen mask rule, and similar to that, I would say that from my experience, and I think you know, statistics will validate this, that less than 1 in 20 senior leadership teams have a process for continuous improvement in their team. They have some ideas for the business, but my feeling and what I always challenge them, I say to a leadership team, if you don't have in your leadership team a process for continuous improvement in the senior leadership team, how can you possibly drive continuous improvement across the entire organization? So I think those would be the 3 things that I would highlight. It's a very, very difficult job to be a member of a senior leadership team because you have a commitment to the senior executive team and you also have your own function. Maybe that's supply chain, maybe that's production. So I don't mean to sound that this is easy work. It's very challenging work. And my work is about helping, struggling teams get good and to help good teams to become great.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing the three things. And I think that, Vivian and I always talk about this also, in the past, there's a lot of time, that companies are saying that we need to, take care for the people. So the responsibility falling to the leaders to take care for the people greatly in the great deal. But now, everywhere we start seeing the shift against, let's take care for ourselves first. And then when we can be really, really in good shape, then we can extend our cares for the other people. And that makes a lot of sense for us instead of, leaders being heroes and then continue to do the superhero's job. And then one day you're going to wear out and there's no strength left for you to add values to others, right?
Yeah, it's great. Can I pick up on that? Just say a couple. I mean, those are two really good thoughts. If I may allow to say two things on that. I think this idea of, sometimes people might think, oh, that sounds selfish to take care of yourself, or it sounds greedy to think of yourself first. It's not. It's basically, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of others, And just to use a little bit something philosophical here, but I don't think it's possible to, in my view, I don't think it's possible to love another person until you love yourself, right? I don't mean in a narcissistic way, but to be able to accept yourself for your good points and your darker side that isn't so good, to accept yourself as a human being. Because when I can accept myself as a human being, I can look at a partner or colleague or something in a very different light. So I think that's important. And the other thing that you said, which was really thoughtful, was this piece about, people trying to play this hero role, and feeling that they got to be the big hero, the man or woman, and everything's on my shoulders. And I even opened the book with a story which was very profound for me. And going back to this very young when I was 8 or 9 years old, and very briefly, we'd be sitting around the dinner table. And there'd be a door ring at the doorbell, it'd be raining outside. I'd go open the door, it's raining, it's dark, and there'd be a huge man standing in the doorway. And he'd say, "Is Coach home?" And I'd think, what? I just kind of stand there. I'm thinking, what's this guy doing at our door? It's nighttime, we're having dinner at the family. And he'd say again, "Is Coach home?" And I'd run back to my dad and said, "Dad, there's a guy out there standing in the rain, and he's asking for Coach," which was my dad's name. He was Coach Norenberg. So my dad would go to the door, take the guy in the living room. My mom would put on a pot of coffee, and I could kind of hear some, maybe some tough conversation or some crying. Somebody was really in pain there. Mom would always push us upstairs and say, "Get out of here." And then the next morning, I'd say to my dad, "Dad, who was that last night, down here?" And he goes, "Well, that was so-and-so." I go, I don't want to say any names. It happened several times. I said, that's so-and-so. I said, "That guy was all-state for you. He was first team all-state. He was all conference. He was a captain of your team. He didn't look so good last night." Mm-hmm. And my dad said something to me. He said, "Life will give us things that sometimes are too much to handle. And some of us will take it out on other people, get aggressive. Some people will drown it in the drink. They will drink to forget that pain. And other people will just raise their hand and say, it's too much for me. I need help." And Marshall Goldsmith, who wrote the foreword in my book, he's a big believer in this too. He is, if not the best coach in the world. He'll raise his hand and say, "I need help." And so to come back to your point, and I think that one of the other keys about creating breakthroughs in leadership teams is when leaders can say, "Hey, I need help." This expression of vulnerability. Because vulnerability is about authenticity. And so, sorry, I didn't want to go on there, but I just want to make a point that when leaders are afraid to share where they're struggling, then nobody will share where they're struggling. And you're going to have an organization which is more mechanical than transformational.
Yep. Thanks so much for sharing that stories. I think that, well, we all got hit by life sometimes. So, you know, if we can, you know, have somebody to come and ask for, you know, ask for help, that would be amazing. So, I'd like to ask this last question then. You know, when you were fifth grade, you look at out the window and you ask yourself, you know, what's outside of the cornfield, right? So now years later, if you look out your window now and then what's outside or what you can see, is there any exciting things that you are doing that you would like to share with Vivian, with me and the audience, so we can celebrate with you in advance?
Well, I would say that's a good question. I don't know, on the horizon. I would say that I just feel like in a really good spot, and I try every day to what I call, you know, practice the 3 H's. You know, not the ha, but the 3 H's, and that is number one, to be happy. The second is to be healthy, and the third is to be helpful. So, you know, there might be some people maybe in a similar position. They might say, well, there's no need or desire to work anymore, and I'm not certainly doing what I do because I need to. I do it because I feel it's a purpose. And so the things that I'm working on are related to helping you know, leadership teams, you know, really create environments where people can play at their best. And that's just a continuous process of, you know, speaking to universities or different groups, or sharing my book with them, or that sometimes working with corporate clients. So that's kind of what I'm doing, and I just really feel grateful to be able to do that and live a life that is so, I feel, so purposeful, and I get to see the rewards of what I do working with teams. So I don't know if that's a big thing out there in the future, but it's what I do, and I really enjoy it.
Thank you so much for sharing the 3H that you are doing. Keep doing that. You know, keep being happy, keep being healthy, and keep being helpful, because, you know, the work that you do really matters to you know, to the many. When you work for the executive teams, the people on top, that can make them happy, can make them healthy, and can, so that they can do a more helpful job for their organization and their people. So well done. Thank you so much for doing that. Then I know that you have other things to do for the day, and so we need to you know, to say goodbye now. It just I look forward to our further conversation in the future. So, you know, let's stay connected, and if you guys haven't been here for 25 years already, so if you can take your wife Noah and Leah to come to Vietnam the next time, please let Vivian and I know. Then we will be so glad to, you know, to take you around town. All right.
Well, Vivian and Ha, I just want to say I have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation with you. You guys are doing, I mean, really remarkable work. I've watched many of your videos. I've seen the things that you're doing. You're both very thoughtful, and you're really leading in a way that I think is very helpful for people. So I'm very grateful to be in your circle. Admire what you do, and I would say I really appreciate that invitation, because we may take you up on that. And also, it goes the other way too. Should you get anywhere in the area of southern Germany, you know, please let us know. We'd love to entertain you guys.
Thank you very much. You have a beautiful day. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Have a nice afternoon there too. Bye bye.